For thousands of years, humanity has built civilizations that seemed impossible to destroy. The Egyptians raised monuments that survived for millennia. Rome created one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. The Maya developed extraordinary knowledge of mathematics and astronomy. China built dynasties that shaped history for centuries. And yet, every civilization eventually faced the same question. Why do societies that reach extraordinary heights eventually begin to decline? Is it because of war? Natural disasters? Corrupt leaders? Economic collapse? Or is there a deeper pattern hidden inside every civilization itself? Today, we will travel across thousands of years of human history to uncover one of the greatest mysteries of our species. Why do civilizations rise, prosper, and eventually fall? Civilization begins with cooperation.
For most of human history, people lived as small groups of hunters and gatherers. Then came one of the greatest transformations in human history: agriculture. When humans learned to cultivate crops and domesticate animals, permanent settlements became possible. Villages became towns. Towns became cities. Cities became civilizations. But civilization created a new challenge. The same systems that created prosperity also created complexity. More people required more food. More cities required more organization. More wealth required more protection. Every civilization is built on a delicate balance between growth and pressure. The greatest danger to a civilization often appears during its most successful period. When societies become wealthy, they expand. They build larger cities. They create more complicated governments. They develop stronger armies. But complexity has a cost.
A system that becomes too complicated can become fragile. A small crisis that would once have been manageable can suddenly affect millions of people. History repeatedly shows that civilizations rarely collapse overnight. Instead, they slowly lose their ability to adapt. The Roman Empire represents one of history's clearest examples. Rome was not destroyed simply because it became weak. For centuries, it was powerful, organized, and innovative. Its roads connected continents. Its laws influenced future nations. Its military dominated vast territories. But maintaining such a massive empire required enormous resources. As borders expanded, problems multiplied. The cost of defense increased. Political conflicts intensified. Economic pressures grew. Rome's story teaches a powerful lesson. A civilization can become a victim of its own success. Visual suggestions, ancient city reconstructions, historical maps, archaeological discoveries, slow cinematic shots of ruins. Narration style:
Calm, dramatic, investigative. The complete 60-minute script will be expanded into multiple chapters with approximately 40,000 words. Deep inside the forests of Mesoamerica, an extraordinary civilization once flourished. The Maya built enormous cities, monumental temples, sophisticated calendars, and political centers connected by trade and warfare. For generations, people imagined the Maya as a civilization that mysteriously vanished. But the truth is more complicated. The Maya did not simply disappear. Many cities were gradually abandoned, political systems fragmented, and populations shifted. Maya peoples survived, adapted, and continue to live today. What declined was not an entire people, but a particular network of cities and political institutions. And this distinction matters, because civilizations rarely vanish like a light being switched off. They transform.
The reasons behind the decline of many classic Maya centers appear to have included prolonged drought, environmental pressure, warfare, political instability, and competition between powerful cities. Imagine a civilization whose cities depend on agricultural systems. For decades, the rains are reliable. Population grows, cities expand, monuments become larger. Political rulers become more powerful.
Then the climate changes. A single bad harvest is survivable. Several bad harvests are dangerous. A generation of repeated drought can become catastrophic. Food becomes scarce. Political legitimacy weakens. Rival cities compete for resources. And once people begin losing confidence in the institutions that organize society, the entire system can begin to fragment. This is one of the most important lessons in the history of civilization. A society can survive a crisis. What becomes dangerous is a crisis that continues longer than the society's ability to adapt.
Few civilizations appear more eternal than ancient Egypt. For thousands of years, the Nile provided a remarkable foundation for agricultural life. The river flooded, deposited fertile soil, and made large-scale agriculture possible. The predictable rhythm of the Nile helped support one of the world's most enduring civilizations. But even Egypt experienced periods of instability. Central authority weakened. Rival political powers emerged. Economic pressures increased. Foreign invasions and internal conflicts transformed the political order. Egypt's history reveals another principle. Stability is not the absence of change. True stability is the ability to absorb change without breaking apart. A civilization can survive rulers dying. It can survive wars. It can survive economic shocks. But if its institutions become unable to respond to new conditions, stability becomes rigidity, and rigidity is dangerous. The world changes, whether a civilization is ready or not.
Chinese history offers perhaps one of the clearest examples of recurring political cycles. A new dynasty often begins after a period of chaos. The new rulers restore order. Taxes are reorganized. Agriculture recovers. Infrastructure is rebuilt. Population increases. Trade expands. The state becomes wealthy. This is the rise. But success creates new pressures. Population grows faster than resources. Land becomes concentrated. Corruption may increase. Government expenses rise. Natural disasters become harder to manage. Peasant hardship grows. Eventually, rebellion or political crisis can weaken the dynasty. A new power emerges, and the cycle begins again. But it would be too simple to say that history repeats mechanically. No dynasty follows exactly the same path. The deeper pattern is not repetition, it is pressure. When institutions can adapt to pressure, societies remain resilient. When institutions cannot adapt, instability grows. We usually imagine wealth as protection.
And in many ways, it is. Wealth allows societies to build roads, hospitals, schools, armies, universities, and scientific institutions. But wealth can also change incentives. As societies become richer, inequality can increase. A small part of the population may accumulate extraordinary resources. Meanwhile, ordinary people may feel that the system no longer rewards effort fairly. This creates something more dangerous than poverty alone. It creates a crisis of legitimacy. People begin asking, does the system still work for us? That question has appeared repeatedly throughout history. Civilizations do not depend only on resources. They depend on trust. Citizens must believe that institutions are at least sufficiently fair, competent, and legitimate. When that belief disappears, cooperation becomes more difficult, and civilization is fundamentally a cooperation system. There is another hidden pattern. Civilizations solve problems by creating systems. A small community can make decisions through direct relationships. A large empire cannot. It needs administrators. Administrators need records. Records require institutions. Institutions require rules. Rules require enforcement. Soon, a simple society has become a massive network of interconnected systems. This complexity creates extraordinary power, but it also creates vulnerability. When everything is connected, problems can spread. A financial crisis can affect employment.
unemployment can affect politics. Political instability can affect investment. A supply disruption can affect food prices. A food crisis can produce social unrest. The larger the system becomes, the more important resilience becomes. Civilization is not simply a race to become more powerful. It is a race to become powerful without becoming fragile. Perhaps the most dangerous moment in a civilization is not when it is poor. It may be when it is convinced that its success will continue forever.
Confidence is useful, but excessive confidence can become complacency. When a society assumes that tomorrow will resemble yesterday, it may stop preparing for radically different futures. History punishes that assumption. Climate changes, technologies appear, trade routes shift, enemies adapt, new diseases emerge, resources become scarce, political institutions become outdated. The future does not owe civilizations continuity. Every generation inherits a system built by the previous one, but every generation also has to decide whether that system is still capable of handling the world it now faces. And this brings us to the most uncomfortable question. If ancient Rome faced the dangers of complexity, if Maya cities faced environmental pressure, if Egypt repeatedly struggled to preserve political stability, if dynasties rose and fell as social and economic pressures accumulated, then what about us? Modern civilization has achieved something unprecedented.
Billions of people are connected through global trade, communication, finance, science, and technology. We can produce more food, energy, and information than any previous generation. But our power has created a new kind of vulnerability. A problem in one part of the world can quickly become a problem somewhere else. Our civilization is more connected than ever. And that means resilience may matter more than raw power. Suggested visuals: Maya ruins and jungle aerial footage, Nile River and Egyptian temples, historical Chinese maps and dynastic transitions, animated population and trade maps, slow shots of ancient ruins contrasted with modern megacities, music, low atmospheric documentary score, increase tension gradually during discussions of instability, then return to a restrained tone during historical analysis. Narration: measured, authoritative, reflective. Avoid sensationalism. The central theme should feel like an investigation rather than a prediction of apocalypse.
For most of human history, civilizations were separated by oceans, mountains, deserts, and distance. Today, those barriers have largely disappeared. A financial decision made in one city can affect millions of people on another continent. A disease can cross borders within hours. A technological breakthrough can spread around the planet almost instantly. Humanity has created something previous civilizations never possessed: a genuinely global civilization. This has enormous advantages. Knowledge moves faster. Trade can connect producers and consumers across continents. Scientists can collaborate across borders. A disaster in one region can trigger assistance from thousands of kilometers away. But interconnectedness creates a paradox. The same connections that make civilization powerful can also make it vulnerable. A system with many connections can distribute resources efficiently. It can also distribute shocks efficiently.
The question is therefore not whether modern civilization will experience crises. It will. The real question is whether our institutions can absorb those crises without turning them into cascading failures. For thousands of years, the world's population remained relatively small. Today, billions of people live on the same planet. Most of humanity now depends on enormous systems of transportation, agriculture, energy, finance, communication, and public administration. Modern cities are extraordinary achievements. A city can contain millions of people who have never met each other, yet they can still cooperate every day. Food arrives, electricity flows, water is treated, waste is removed, information moves. None of this happens automatically. It is the result of an enormous network of institutions and infrastructure. And that network has to keep working. The larger the population becomes, the more important coordination becomes. This is not necessarily a reason for pessimism.
Scale can create efficiency, but scale also means that failures can become larger. A broken bridge affects a neighborhood. A failure in a major transportation network can affect an entire region. Civilization has become a machine of extraordinary scale, and every machine requires maintenance. Ancient civilizations depended on nature more directly than modern societies do. But modern civilization has not escaped environmental limits. It has simply hidden many of them behind technology. Food still requires soil, water, sunlight, and energy. Cities still require rivers, reservoirs, electricity, and transport. Industry still requires raw materials. Technology can increase efficiency, but efficiency does not mean infinite supply. History shows that environmental stress becomes especially dangerous when combined with political instability. A drought alone may be manageable. A drought combined with high food prices, political conflict, migration, and weak institutions can become something much larger. This is why civilization cannot be understood through a single cause. Collapse is rarely caused by one problem. It usually emerges from interactions between problems. Technology has always changed the balance between human beings and their environment. Agriculture transformed food production. Writing transformed administration. Printing transformed information. Industrialization transformed energy. Computers transformed calculation. The internet transformed communication. And artificial intelligence may transform decision-making itself. Every technological revolution creates opportunities, but technology also creates new dependencies. A society that relies heavily on a technology must become capable of maintaining it. This produces an important historical paradox. Technology can make civilization more resilient. But excessive dependence on complex technology can also make civilization more fragile if critical systems fail. The lesson is not to reject technology. It is to build systems that remain functional, even when technology does not behave exactly as expected. Artificial intelligence introduces a new question. For the first time, humans are creating systems that can process information, recognize patterns, generate content, and assist with complex decisions at enormous speed. The potential benefits are extraordinary. AI could accelerate scientific discovery. It could improve education. It could help optimize energy systems. It could assist medicine, engineering, and climate modeling. But every powerful technology creates governance problems. Who controls it? Who benefits from it? Who is responsible when it makes mistakes? And what happens when technological change moves faster than institutions can adapt? This is not entirely new. Railways, electricity, nuclear weapons, computers, and the internet all forced societies to create new rules. The difference is speed. If technological capabilities advance faster than political and social institutions can adapt, the gap between capability and governance can become dangerous. The future of civilization may therefore depend not simply on how intelligent our machines become. It may depend on whether our institutions become intelligent enough to govern them. A civilization can survive inequality, but extreme inequality can become politically destabilizing when people stop believing that the system offers meaningful opportunities. The problem is not simply that some people have more wealth than others. The deeper issue is social mobility, trust, and legitimacy. If people believe that institutions reward effort and competence, inequality may be tolerated. If they believe that institutions are permanently captured by a small group, frustration can grow. History contains many examples of societies experiencing tension between elites and broader populations. The specific causes differ,
But the underlying question remains remarkably consistent. Who benefits from the civilization's prosperity? A stable civilization needs not only wealth, it needs a convincing answer to that question. Civilization requires cooperation among people who disagree. That sounds obvious, but cooperation becomes difficult when groups no longer share basic facts, institutions, or goals. Modern information technology has made communication easier than ever. It has also made it easier for different communities to inhabit completely different information environments. People can receive different explanations for the same event. They can develop different ideas about whom to trust. And when trust collapses, even competent institutions may struggle to function. This is another lesson from history. Civilizations are not held together by infrastructure alone. They are held together by shared expectations. People need to believe that rules exist, that promises matter, and that other people will generally cooperate. Without that foundation, even sophisticated institutions can become surprisingly fragile. When we hear the word collapse, we imagine a dramatic ending. A city burns, an empire falls, a palace is abandoned. But historians often see something more gradual. Political authority fragments. Trade becomes less reliable. Population moves. Institutions change. Some cities shrink while others grow. A civilization can therefore decline in one form and continue in another. This matters because it changes the question. The goal is not to ask, will civilization collapse? The more useful question is, what kind of transformation will civilization experience? Every generation lives through transformations. Some were peaceful, some were violent, some were almost invisible until historians look backward. The future may not resemble the past, but the pressures that shape societies remain remarkably human. So, after thousands of years of history, are we trapped in a cycle? Not necessarily. History does not prove that every civilization must collapse. It proves something more subtle. Civilizations that fail to adapt become vulnerable. Civilizations that learn, reform, diversify, and renew their institutions can survive enormous shocks. The most important advantage humanity possesses is not wealth. It is cumulative knowledge. We can study previous civilizations. We can examine their mistakes. We can compare different societies. We can build institutions deliberately. For the first time, humanity has enough historical evidence to recognize patterns while they are happening. That may be our greatest opportunity. The past cannot tell us exactly what will happen, but it can tell us what kinds of questions we should be asking. Perhaps the strongest civilizations are not the ones that never experience crisis. They are the ones that learn from crisis. A resilient civilization can admit failure. It can change policies. It can replace ineffective institutions. It can invest in education. It can protect scientific inquiry. It can create mechanisms for peaceful disagreement. It can prepare for uncertainty instead of assuming that tomorrow will be predictable. This may be the opposite of the traditional image of civilization. Civilization is not a monument. It is not a palace. It is not an empire. It is a process of cooperation that must be renewed by every generation. After thousands of years of history, perhaps the greatest enemy of civilization is not war, not disease, not climate, not even technological change. The greatest enemy may be the belief that success is permanent. Every civilization begins with people solving problems. They invent. They cooperate. They build. They adapt. Then success arrives. And success creates comfort. Comfort can create complacency. Complacency can create rigidity. Rigidity makes adaptation harder. And when the environment changes, a civilization that cannot change with it becomes vulnerable. This is why the story of civilization is not simply a story about rise and fall. It is a story about adaptation. The pyramids survived because stone can survive thousands of years. But the societies that built them changed. Rome's roads survived. Its political system did not. Maya descendants survived. Their ancient political world transformed. Dynasties disappeared. Cultures continued. This is perhaps the most important truth of all. Civilizations may fall. Humanity continues. The real question is what we choose to carry forward. Closing narration. Look at the ruins of an ancient city. At first, they seem like evidence of failure. But perhaps they are evidence of something else. Every ruin is a record of human ambition. Someone imagined a city that did not yet exist. Someone organized thousands of people to build it.
Someone planted crops. Someone wrote laws. Someone taught a child. Someone looked at the stars and tried to understand the universe. Civilization is fragile, but it is also extraordinarily persistent. Across thousands of years, humans have rebuilt after wars, famines, epidemics, political collapse, and environmental disasters. The lesson of history is therefore not that civilization is doomed. The lesson is that civilization requires constant work. It requires adaptation. It requires trust. It requires institutions capable of changing when the world changes. And above all, it requires people willing to learn from the generations that came before them. Perhaps humanity cannot escape every crisis. Perhaps no civilization can guarantee eternal prosperity. But we may be able to escape one of history's oldest mistakes, believing that because a civilization has survived yesterday, it is guaranteed to survive tomorrow. The future has never been guaranteed. It has always been built. And this time, we are the ones holding the tools. Suggested final sequence. 1. Ancient ruins at sunrise. 2. Animated timeline of major civilizations. 3. Roman roads and abandoned structures. 4. Maya archaeological sites. 5. Egyptian monuments along the Nile. 6. Historical Chinese maps. 7. Modern megacities at night. 8. Satellites, data networks, laboratories, and AI imagery. 9. Return to ancient ruins. 10. Fade to Earth from space. Music arc. Beginning, mysterious and restrained. Middle, increasingly tense and analytical. Modern civilization section, larger, more technological soundscape. Final chapter, emotional but restrained. Final line, music drops almost completely, leaving a few seconds of silence. End card. History does not predict the future, but it can teach us how to face it. Rome did not become powerful because it avoided complexity. It became powerful because it mastered it. A village beside the Tiber eventually became the center of a political system stretching across much of Europe, North Africa, and the Middle East. Roads connected distant provinces. Taxes moved toward the center. Grain moved toward cities. Orders traveled across thousands of kilometers. The Roman army protected borders that were almost impossible to imagine from the perspective of an earlier age. This was one of history's greatest achievements. But every achievement creates a maintenance bill. The farther Rome expanded, the more territory it had to defend. The longer its borders became, the more soldiers it required. The more provinces it governed, the more administrators it needed. Expansion could generate wealth, but expansion could also generate obligations. Eventually, the empire faced a difficult problem. The cost of maintaining the system could grow faster than the benefits of expanding it. This is sometimes called the problem of diminishing returns. The first territories conquered may be highly valuable. Later territories may be expensive to defend. At some point, additional expansion stops strengthening the system and begins exhausting it.
Rome's history was not a simple story of decline after conquest. For centuries, Rome adapted. It reformed its army. It changed its political institutions. It divided administrative responsibilities. It altered taxation. It moved political centers. It experimented with new forms of government. This is important because it shows that civilizations do not simply collapse because they become large. They become vulnerable when their institutions cannot keep pace with the problems created by their own scale. The Roman story therefore contains both a warning and a lesson. Complexity is not the enemy. Unmanaged complexity is. The Maya world presents another version of the same problem. Imagine a powerful city surrounded by farmland. The ruler's legitimacy depends partly on the ability of the political system to provide order. Temples rise, palaces expand, ceremonial life becomes more elaborate, population increases. Then environmental conditions become less predictable. Rainfall declines, harvests become uncertain. A population that once seemed like an achievement can suddenly become a burden. More people means more mouths to feed. If food production falls, political leaders face a terrible choice. They can redistribute resources. They can reduce consumption. They can negotiate with rivals. They can migrate. Or they can attempt to control more territory. Sometimes political competition intensifies. Warfare can become more frequent. And warfare itself consumes resources that are desperately needed elsewhere. This creates a feedback loop. Environmental stress weakens political authority. Weak political authority makes cooperation harder. Reduced cooperation makes environmental stress more dangerous. Eventually, people may leave cities that once represented the center of their world. The lesson is not that drought caused the Maya collapse. It is that environmental stress interacted with political and social systems. That distinction matters. History is rarely a single-cause story. The Chinese dynastic tradition provides an unusually long historical record. Dynasties changed, institutions changed, territories changed. But agriculture, taxation, administration, and population remained central to political stability. A new dynasty often inherited a society exhausted by war. The new rulers could then make reforms. Land was redistributed, taxes were adjusted, agriculture recovered, security improved, population grew, trade expanded. The state became stronger. But success gradually changed the conditions that had created it. Population pressure increased, land became scarce, local elites accumulated influence, government administration became expensive. Natural disasters could push vulnerable farmers into debt, and once large numbers of people lost economic security, political unrest could spread rapidly. This pattern should not be interpreted as a mechanical law. Chinese history contains many exceptions, but over long periods, one principle appears repeatedly. Political stability depends on the state's ability to maintain a workable relationship between population, resources, taxation, and legitimacy. When that relationship breaks, reform becomes unavoidable. The question is whether reform arrives before crisis becomes rebellion. A civilization is an economic system before it is a monument. Every city requires food. Every army requires supplies. Every government requires revenue. Every infrastructure network requires maintenance. Economic systems therefore form the hidden foundation of civilization. When economic growth is strong, problems can be absorbed. A government can repair roads. It can respond to disasters. It can subsidize food. It can maintain security. But when growth slows while obligations continue increasing, pressure accumulates. This is one of the most dangerous economic situations in history. People become accustomed to a certain standard of living. Institutions become accustomed to certain levels of revenue. Governments make promises. Businesses make investments. Households take on debt. Then growth slows. Suddenly, everyone discovers that the system depended on continuous expansion. The result does not have to be collapse. It may be reform, it may be redistribution, it may be technological innovation. But if a society cannot adjust its expectations to new economic realities, political conflict can intensify. The lesson is simple. A civilization cannot consume the future indefinitely. Every complex civilization develops differences in wealth. Some people own more land. Some control trade. Some hold political office. Some command armies. Some accumulate knowledge.
Inequality by itself does not automatically destroy a civilization. The danger emerges when inequality begins to undermine social cohesion. Imagine two citizens living in the same city. One believes the system is difficult but fundamentally fair. The other believes the system is permanently rigged. They may look at the same society and see completely different realities. When that gap becomes widespread, cooperation becomes harder. People stop trusting institutions. They stop believing sacrifices are shared. They become more willing to support radical change. Political systems then face a choice. They can reform, or they can attempt to preserve the existing order through force. Force can produce short-term stability, but it can also make long-term legitimacy weaker. History repeatedly shows that coercion can postpone a political crisis. It rarely eliminates the underlying causes.
One of the most dangerous developments in a mature civilization occurs when decision-makers become insulated from the consequences of their decisions. This can happen slowly. Successful institutions create successful elites. Successful elites gain resources. Resources create influence. Influence creates greater access to information and political power. Eventually, the people making decisions may experience the world very differently from the people living with those decisions. This does not require evil intentions. It can happen through social separation alone. The ruling class may genuinely believe that the system is functioning. Meanwhile, ordinary citizens may experience rising costs, declining opportunities, or insecurity. The result is a dangerous information gap. A civilization can survive bad news. It has a harder time surviving a system in which bad news cannot reach the people with the power to respond to it. Civilizations are often judged by their monuments.
But monuments are not what keep societies alive. Institutions do. Courts, schools, governments, markets, scientific organizations, local communities, professional networks. These institutions create mechanisms for solving problems. A strong institution does not need to be perfect. It needs to be capable of correction. This may be one of the most important differences between resilient and fragile societies. A resilient institution can acknowledge mistakes. It can change leadership. It can revise policies. It can incorporate new evidence. A fragile institution treats criticism as an existential threat. It protects its own survival instead of the society it was created to serve. Once institutions become incapable of self-correction, even small problems can accumulate. And accumulated problems eventually become structural problems. Every civilization has an information problem. Leaders cannot personally see everything happening across a large society. They depend on reports.
Those reports depend on institutions. Institutions depend on incentives. And incentives influence what information gets transmitted. If telling the truth is rewarded, information tends to improve. If telling leaders what they want to hear is rewarded, information becomes distorted. This problem can become catastrophic. A government may believe food supplies are adequate when local populations are starving. A military command may believe a campaign is succeeding when it is failing. An economic authority may believe markets are stable when households are under enormous pressure. The larger the civilization, the more important accurate information becomes. Modern technology gives us unprecedented access to information. But more information does not automatically mean better understanding.
A civilization can drown in data and still fail to recognize reality. Every civilization eventually encounters a crisis it did not expect. The important question is not whether the crisis occurs.
It is what happens next. A resilient society treats crisis as information. It asks, what failed? Why did it fail? How can the system be redesigned? A fragile society asks a different question. Who can we blame? Blame can be emotionally satisfying, but it does not repair infrastructure. It does not restore trust. It does not rebuild institutions. The ability to learn during crisis may therefore be one of civilization's greatest survival mechanisms. A crisis reveals hidden weaknesses. The civilization that studies those weaknesses becomes stronger. The civilization that hides them becomes more vulnerable the next time. There is another mistake we often make when looking backward. We assume that when a civilization declines, everything about it disappears. That is rarely true. Languages survive. Religions survive. Technologies survive. Architectural ideas survive. Legal traditions survive. Food survive. Stories survive. People move. Cultures mix. New societies emerge from old ones.
The fall of a political system can therefore become the foundation for another civilization. In that sense, history is less like a series of endings and more like a chain of transformations. Rome changed. Egypt changed. The Maya world changed. Chinese dynasties changed. But human beings continued to build. This gives us a more nuanced understanding of decline. Civilizational change can be destructive, but it can also create new forms of organization. The real tragedy is not change itself. The tragedy is unnecessary suffering caused by an inability to adapt. History cannot give us a perfect prediction of the future. There is no simple formula saying that once inequality reaches a certain level, collapse must occur. There is no historical clock that tells us when a civilization has entered its final century. Human societies are too complicated. People make choices. Institutions can reform. Unexpected discoveries can change entire economies. New leaders can alter political trajectories.
A single invention can reshape the world. So the value of history is not prediction, it is preparation. History teaches us to recognize vulnerabilities before they become disasters. It teaches us that prosperity requires maintenance. It teaches us that institutions need feedback. It teaches us that social trust matters. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches us that no generation inherits a civilization that is finished. Every generation receives a system and modifies it. The future is therefore not simply something that happens to us. It is something we participate in creating. We have now seen several of the forces that can push civilizations toward instability. Expansion can create burdens. Environmental pressure can expose weaknesses. Economic stagnation can intensify conflict. Inequality can undermine legitimacy. Insulated elites can lose contact with reality. Complex institutions can become difficult to reform.
And distorted information can prevent societies from recognizing danger. None of these forces guarantees collapse, but together they reveal something important. Civilizations do not usually fall because they suddenly become weak. They become vulnerable when the systems that once created success begin producing unintended consequences. And that brings us to the final question. What happens when all of these pressures appear at the same time? Because that is where the story becomes relevant to us. Visual direction. Use animated maps for Roman expansion. Contrast Roman infrastructure with abandoned ruins. Show Maya temples surrounded by rainforest. Use rainfall and agricultural animations for environmental stress. Use historical Chinese dynasty timelines and population graphics. Visualize economic pressure with simple animated charts. Contrast elite palaces with ordinary settlements. Chapter end.
Use archival documents, inscriptions, maps, and archaeological details to create an investigative tone. Narration. Slow, authoritative, cinematic. Allow pauses after major questions. Avoid presenting complex historical decline as a single cause theory. Recommended pacing. Approximately 14 to 16 minutes when fully expanded with visual pauses, archival footage, maps, and transitions. For most of history, civilizations could experience crises without immediately affecting the entire planet. A drought could devastate one kingdom. A war could destroy one region. A failed harvest could cause famine in a particular valley. Modern civilization is different. Today, billions of people participate in overlapping systems of trade, finance, communication, transportation, energy, and technology. This interconnectedness has created extraordinary prosperity. A product can be designed in one country, manufactured in another, assembled somewhere else, and sold around the world.
Information can travel across the planet in seconds. Scientific discoveries can spread almost instantly. But interconnected systems have a strange characteristic. They can become efficient precisely because they are connected. And that same connectivity can allow disruptions to travel quickly. The modern world therefore faces a new civilizational challenge. We are no longer simply trying to make systems larger. We are trying to make them resilient. Efficiency asks, how can we produce more with less? Resilience asks, what happens when something goes wrong? The difference sounds small. It is not. A system optimized entirely for efficiency may remove spare capacity. It may rely on just-in-time deliveries. It may concentrate production in a small number of locations. That can reduce costs, but it can also reduce the margin for error. Ancient civilizations struggled with food storage and transportation. Modern civilization struggles with supply chains that can stretch across oceans.
The technology is different. The underlying problem is surprisingly similar. How much complexity can a society depend on before complexity becomes a source of vulnerability? Walk through a modern supermarket and you are looking at a map of civilization. The food may come from several countries. The packaging may come from another. The machines that processed it may contain components from multiple continents. The payment system may depend on digital networks. The electricity may come from a national grid connected to neighboring regions. A single ordinary transaction can therefore depend on thousands of invisible relationships. We rarely notice these systems when they work. That is the point. Infrastructure is successful when it becomes invisible. But invisibility can create a psychological problem. People may assume that essential systems are permanent. They are not. They require energy. They require maintenance. They require skilled workers. They require institutions.
They require cooperation. Globalization has created extraordinary redundancy in some areas and extraordinary concentration in others. A resilient civilization must know the difference. It must identify which systems are critical. It must understand where dependencies exist. And it must prepare for disruptions that cannot be predicted precisely. The future does not require us to eliminate interconnectedness. It requires us to understand it. Every civilization is an energy system. Ancient agriculture depended on sunlight captured by plants. Animal power expanded human productivity. Water and wind provided additional sources of mechanical energy. Then fossil fuels transformed the scale of civilization. Coal powered industrialization. Oil transformed transportation. Natural gas reshaped heating, electricity, and industry. The enormous energy density of fossil fuels allowed human societies to perform work on a scale previous generations could barely imagine. Modern agriculture is not simply sunlight and soil. It depends on machinery, fertilizers, transport, refrigeration, and processing. Modern cities are not simply buildings. They are energy-consuming systems.
This creates a profound dependency. A civilization that uses enormous amounts of energy must maintain a reliable energy supply. The challenge is not simply producing energy. It is producing it affordably, reliably, and sustainably, while adapting infrastructure to changing conditions. Energy transitions are therefore not merely technological transitions. They are civilizational transitions. They affect industry, they affect transportation, they affect food, they affect geopolitics, they affect household budgets. And whenever a society changes the foundation of its energy system, it changes the structure of the civilization built on top of it. Ancient civilizations lived directly with climate variability. Modern civilization has more tools. We can move food, we can irrigate fields.
We can build reservoirs. We can forecast weather. We can develop drought-resistant crops. But technology does not eliminate environmental limits. It changes the range of possible responses. Climate pressure becomes especially significant when it interacts with existing vulnerabilities. A wealthy society with strong institutions may adapt gradually. A poorer society with weak infrastructure may struggle. A densely populated region may face different challenges from a sparsely populated one. A coastal city faces different risks from an inland agricultural region. This is why environmental change should not be understood as a single apocalyptic switch. The more important question is adaptive capacity. Can institutions respond? Can infrastructure be upgraded? Can populations move when necessary? Can governments coordinate? Can scientific information reach decision makers?
The history of civilization suggests that environmental stress becomes most dangerous when societies are already politically or economically fragile. Some of the most powerful forces in history move so slowly that people barely notice them. Demography is one of them. A society's age structure affects everything. Young populations create demand for schools, housing, and jobs. Working-age populations drive production and taxation. Older populations increase demand for healthcare and pensions. For centuries, many societies experienced rapid population growth. Today, some countries face a very different challenge. Birth rates have fallen. Populations are aging. The number of working-age people may shrink relative to the number of retirees. This is not automatically a catastrophe. Productivity can increase. Technology can compensate for labor shortages. Migration can change population structures. Policies can adapt. But demographic change unfolds slowly.
That makes it politically difficult. A government can respond quickly to a war. It cannot instantly create millions of young workers. A society can build a hospital in years. It cannot rebuild an entire generation overnight. Demography, therefore, acts like a slow-moving tide. It can reshape civilization without producing a dramatic headline. Every large civilization depends on strangers trusting one another. You trust that the currency you receive will still have value. You trust that food sold in a store is safe. You trust that a contract will be enforced. You trust that electricity will continue to flow. You trust that information from institutions is not deliberately fabricated. Most of the time, we do not think about these assumptions, but civilization depends on them. Trust reduces the cost of cooperation. When trust is high, people can build long-term relationships. When trust is low, every transaction becomes harder. People demand more verification. They hoard resources. They avoid institutions. They become more suspicious. The result can be a vicious cycle. Low trust makes institutions less effective. Less effective institutions produce worse outcomes. Worse outcomes reduce trust. And the cycle continues. This may be one of the least visible threats to a civilization. You cannot easily photograph the collapse of trust, but you can see its consequences everywhere. Ancient rulers faced an information problem because they had too little information. Modern societies face a different problem. We may have too much.
Every day, billions of messages, videos, articles, images, and signals move through digital networks. This creates extraordinary opportunities. But information is not the same as knowledge. Knowledge is not the same as wisdom. A civilization can have enormous amounts of data and still make terrible decisions. The challenge becomes determining which information is reliable. Algorithms can amplify emotionally powerful content.
People can become trapped inside communities that reinforce existing beliefs. False information can spread faster than careful analysis. And when citizens cannot agree on basic facts, democratic institutions can become harder to operate. The historical problem has returned in a new form. The question is no longer simply, can information reach the center? It is, can society distinguish signal from noise? Artificial intelligence changes the equation because it can increase the speed at which information is processed. A machine can analyze documents, generate text, recognize patterns, write software, translate languages, assist research, simulate scenarios. This creates enormous potential. But multipliers work in both directions. If an institution is competent, technology can make it more capable. If an institution is dysfunctional, technology can make dysfunction faster. AI can help scientists discover. It can also help misinformation scale. It can improve education.
It can also automate low-quality content. It can help governments analyze complex systems. It can also create new surveillance and governance challenges. The central issue is therefore not whether AI is good or bad. The issue is governance. Powerful tools require powerful institutions capable of understanding their consequences. The civilizations of the future may be shaped less by who has the most advanced technology and more by who can integrate technology responsibly. Human institutions are slow. That is sometimes a weakness. It is also sometimes a strength. Laws change slowly because societies need time to debate consequences. Norms change slowly because people need time to adapt. Education systems change slowly because training millions of people takes years. Technology can change much faster. This creates a gap. A new technology can become widespread before society understands its risks. A business model can transform an industry before regulators know how to respond.
A communication platform can change political behavior before citizens understand how algorithms shape attention. The challenge is not to stop technological progress. It is to create institutions capable of learning quickly enough. That may become one of the defining political challenges of the 21st century. Modern humanity is richer in material terms than most people in history could have imagined. Yet wealth does not automatically create satisfaction. People compare themselves with others. Expectations rise. New technologies reveal lifestyles that previous generations never saw. A society can become materially richer while simultaneously experiencing anxiety about status, housing, employment, identity, or the future. This creates what we might call the wealth paradox. Economic growth solves many problems, but success creates new expectations, and expectations can rise faster than institutions can satisfy them. A civilization, therefore, needs more than economic growth. It needs mechanisms for distributing opportunity, maintaining social mobility, and helping citizens believe that the future can improve. Without that belief, prosperity can become strangely unstable. People may have more than their ancestors and still feel that they are losing something. For most of history, one generation could expect the basic structure of daily life to remain recognizable. A farmer might live differently from his great-grandfather, but the transformation was gradual. Today, technological and economic change can occur within a single decade. People can change careers multiple times. Entire industries can appear and disappear. Communication habits can transform within years. The result is acceleration. Acceleration creates opportunity, but it also creates psychological pressure.
Humans evolved for environments in which change was comparatively slow. Modern institutions often struggle with the speed of technological change.
Education may train people for jobs that later disappear. Governments may regulate yesterday's technologies. Communities may struggle to preserve social cohesion while lifestyles change rapidly. The challenge of modern civilization is therefore not merely surviving change. It is learning how to change without losing continuity. The ancient civilizations in our story faced crises with limited knowledge. We have an advantage they did not. We know their stories. We have archaeology. We have statistics. We have climate records. We have satellites. We have global communication. We have scientific institutions. We can see problems developing at scales no ancient ruler could imagine. That means our failure, if it comes, will be different. We cannot claim that we had no warning. The great test of modern civilization may therefore be institutional rather than technological. Can billions of people coordinate? Can societies tolerate disagreement without destroying cooperation? Can governments respond to evidence? Can institutions reform without waiting for catastrophe? Can technological power be matched by political wisdom? Those are not questions about machines. They are questions about humans. Perhaps the civilization of the future will not be defined by how much it can consume. Perhaps it will be defined by how much complexity it can manage without becoming fragile. A mature civilization may value redundancy as well as efficiency. It may protect critical infrastructure. It may diversify energy sources. It may invest in education and scientific literacy. It may strengthen institutions that allow peaceful correction. It may measure success not only by production, but by resilience. This would represent a profound change in how civilization thinks about progress. For thousands of years, progress meant expansion. More land, more people, more production, more buildings, more power. The next stage may require a different definition.
Progress may mean becoming better at adapting. We began this journey with a simple question. Why do civilizations rise and fall? We have now seen that decline rarely has one cause. It is usually a combination. A civilization becomes larger. Its systems become more complex. Its success creates new dependencies. Environmental, economic, political, and demographic pressures accumulate. Institutions may adapt, or they may become rigid. Trust may strengthen, or it may fracture. And eventually, the civilization reaches a moment when its ability to adapt becomes more important than its ability to expand. That is where our story is heading. Because the final question is not whether modern civilization resembles Rome, Maya society, Egypt, or historical China. It doesn't. The final question is more unsettling. What if the pattern is not about civilizations having the same history? What if the pattern is about civilizations repeatedly facing the same human problem? Success changes the system.
The changed system creates new risks, and the ability to recognize those risks determines what happens next. Visual direction. Global shipping routes and container ports, data centers, power grids, satellites, and financial districts, agricultural machinery and energy infrastructure, climate visualization using maps and environmental footage, population pyramids and demographic animations, social media feeds and information streams, AI laboratories and human-machine interaction, modern megacities transitioning into nighttime aerial views. Pacing. This section should feel increasingly contemporary and urgent. Use longer pauses before major questions and allow the music to build gradually. Narration. Confident, investigative, and restrained. The goal is not to predict imminent collapse, but to examine vulnerabilities and the possibility of adaptation. Long before Rome, before the Maya, before the great imperial systems of later history, another interconnected world experienced a remarkable crisis. Around the end of the Late Bronze Age, Major centers across the eastern Mediterranean and Near East suffered destruction, disruption, or transformation. Egypt, the Hittite world, Mycenaean Greece, and other interconnected societies were caught in a period of upheaval. For a long time, people searched for a single explanation: invaders, earthquakes, drought, trade disruption. But the more evidence researchers examine, the harder it becomes to identify one universal cause. The more interesting possibility is that several stresses interacted. When a system is highly interconnected, a disruption in one place can become a problem somewhere else. A shortage of one material affects production. Production affects trade. Trade affects political relationships. Political instability affects security. Security problems affect trade again.
A chain reaction begins. This is not proof that modern civilization will follow the same path, but it provides an important analogy. The danger of complexity is not that every component is weak. The danger is that many components depend on one another. Imagine waking up in a great ancient city. The markets are open, the streets are crowded, merchants are arriving. Government officials are issuing orders. The city feels permanent. Then, something changes. A shipment does not arrive. At first, nobody panics. The city has reserves. But the next shipment is delayed too. Prices rise. Merchants become cautious. People begin storing food. Rumors spread. Authorities promise that the situation will be temporary. Then a neighboring region experiences the same problem. Trade routes become less reliable. Tax revenues fall. The government cuts spending. Soldiers become harder to supply. Now the original disruption has become a political problem. This is how systemic crises often feel from the inside. Not like the end of civilization, like a series of ordinary problems becoming slightly worse. People adapt. Then they adapt again. And then suddenly, the old normal no longer exists. The decline of the Western Roman Empire is often represented by a single date. But people living through Roman history did not experience a single moment called the fall. They experienced wars, political assassinations, currency problems, military pressures, civil conflicts, economic disruptions, migration, administrative changes, religious transformation. The Western imperial government eventually disappeared as a political institution, but Roman culture did not disappear. Cities continued. Christian institutions expanded. Roman law influenced later societies. Languages evolved from Latin. Roads and buildings survived. The story is therefore not a clean line from greatness to destruction. It is a story of institutional transformation. This distinction is essential for understanding modern civilization. If a government collapses, does civilization collapse? Not necessarily. If an economic system changes, does society disappear? No. Civilization can reorganize. Sometimes the most important historical event is not the moment something ends. It is what replaces it. The popular image of the Maya often begins with a mystery. A civilization flourished. Then it disappeared. But archaeology tells a more complicated story. Some major cities declined. Population patterns changed. Political networks fragmented. Other regions remained active, and Maya peoples survived. This changes the emotional meaning of collapse. A political center can fail without an entire culture disappearing. A city can be abandoned while a language survives. An empire can fragment while knowledge continues. History is full of these transformations. When we call something a collapse, we should therefore ask, collapse of what? A government? A city? A trade network? A population center? A political elite? Or an entire culture? These are not the same thing. Modern discussions often use the word collapse as if it means total extinction. Historical evidence usually demands more precision.
Is there a point beyond which a civilization cannot recover? Sometimes there may be, but identifying that point in advance is extremely difficult. A system can absorb one shock. It can absorb two. It can even recover from a devastating war. But repeated shocks can reduce resilience. Infrastructure deteriorates. Human capital is lost. Institutions become weaker. Trust declines. People leave. Investment falls. Each problem makes the next problem harder to solve. This is what makes cascading failure so dangerous. The system does not simply lose one component. It loses the ability to repair components. That is the true threshold. A civilization becomes deeply vulnerable when it no longer has enough spare capacity to recover.
Survival is not the same as resilience. A society can survive a crisis by sacrificing enormous resources, but a resilient society can recover and learn. It can preserve knowledge. It can rebuild infrastructure. It can maintain social cooperation. It can create new institutions. This suggests that civilization should be judged not only by its peak achievements. A society that builds spectacular monuments but cannot adapt may be less resilient than a society with fewer monuments but stronger institutions. This is an uncomfortable idea. Human beings love visible achievements. We celebrate skyscrapers, armies, temples, highways, and technological breakthroughs. But resilience is often invisible. It looks like spare capacity, maintenance, education, redundancy, trust, preparedness. These things rarely make headlines until they are missing. Civilizations often make decisions on short time horizons. Politicians think about elections. Businesses think about quarterly results.
Families think about monthly expenses, but infrastructure can last decades. Forests grow for generations. Education shapes people over lifetimes. Demographic change unfolds over decades. Climate systems respond over long periods. This creates a fundamental mismatch. The problems that matter most to civilization are often slower than the political systems designed to address them. A leader may know that a reform is necessary in 20 years, but fear the cost today. A company may know that maintenance is necessary, but postpone it because the benefit is invisible. A society may understand that education matters, but underinvest because results take years. Civilizational resilience, therefore, requires something rare: the ability to invest in benefits that the current generation may never fully see. The most important systems in civilization are often the least glamorous: water pipes, power lines, bridges, schools, hospitals, archives, software, scientific institutions, courts. These systems do not create dramatic headlines when they work. They simply make ordinary life possible. But maintenance is politically difficult. New projects are visible. Maintenance is invisible. A new bridge can be celebrated. Replacing the bridge's hidden structural components may receive little attention. The same principle applies to institutions. Creating a new law is visible. Maintaining a culture of competence and accountability is not. Civilizations can therefore become dangerously focused on expansion while neglecting maintenance. History repeatedly reminds us, what is not maintained eventually becomes expensive to repair. It is tempting to explain civilization through systems: economics, climate, energy, demography, technology. But behind every system are human beings. People make decisions. People interpret information. People cooperate. People compete. People take risks. People become afraid.
And people sometimes make choices that appear irrational when viewed from the outside. This is why no model can perfectly predict civilizational change. Human beings can surprise one another. A population can remain peaceful under enormous pressure. A small reform can prevent a major crisis. A new leader can change an entire political trajectory. A community can preserve knowledge after institutions collapse. History is therefore not deterministic. There are patterns, but there are also choices, and choices create possibilities. When evidence of a problem becomes uncomfortable, societies face a psychological choice: adapt or deny. Denial can be surprisingly powerful because it protects people from uncertainty. If the problem is not real, no action is necessary. If the warning is exaggerated, waiting seems rational. But uncertainty does not make a risk disappear. In fact, uncertainty is precisely why preparation matters. The strongest civilizations do not need perfect predictions.
正文结束。
They need institutions that can operate under uncertainty. They can prepare for several possibilities. They can revise decisions. They can change course. They can admit when assumptions were wrong. That may be the most sophisticated form of power. Not the ability to control the future, the ability to remain functional when the future refuses to behave as expected. Imagine a civilization designed around resilience. Its energy system has diversity. Its food system has buffers. Its infrastructure is maintained before failure. Its scientific institutions are protected from political pressure. Its information systems reward accuracy. Its political institutions allow peaceful correction. Its citizens have access to education. Its economy creates opportunities for people to adapt. Its leaders can receive bad news without treating it as betrayal. Such a civilization would not be invulnerable. Nothing is. But it would have something more valuable than invulnerability. It would have recovery capacity. And that may be the closest humanity can come to escaping the historical cycle. Not preventing every crisis, but preventing crises from becoming irreversible. At the beginning of this journey, we asked, why do civilizations rise and fall? After examining thousands of years of history, perhaps the question should be slightly different. Why do civilizations become less capable of adapting? Because that is what the historical record repeatedly brings us back to. Success creates complexity. Complexity creates dependencies. Dependencies create vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities create pressure. Pressure demands adaptation. And when adaptation fails, systems transform. Sometimes peacefully, sometimes violently. Sometimes gradually, sometimes suddenly. The rise and fall of civilization may therefore be less like a circle and more like a repeated test. Every generation receives a new version of the same challenge. Can a society become more powerful without becoming less adaptable? Modern civilization has reached a scale no previous civilization ever achieved. Our networks cross oceans. Our technologies operate at planetary scale. Our decisions can affect people thousands of kilometers away. That gives humanity extraordinary power. It also gives our mistakes extraordinary reach. A local failure in the ancient world might remain local. A systemic failure today can propagate globally. That is why the lessons of history matter. Not because Rome predicts our future. Not because the Maya provide a simple warning. Not because every civilization must eventually collapse. History matters because it shows us the consequences of systems that become unable to adapt. The future remains open, and that means our decisions matter. The ruins of civilizations are often described as warnings, but they are also invitations. They ask us to look more carefully at the systems we inherit, to ask what is working. What is fragile? What is being ignored? What information is missing? Who benefits? Who is excluded? Which institutions can change? Which ones cannot? And whether today's success is creating tomorrow's vulnerability. Perhaps the greatest lesson of history is not that everything ends. It is that everything changes. The civilizations that survive are not those that remain unchanged. They are the ones capable of changing without losing the ability to cooperate.
That is a very different definition of strength, and it may be the only definition that matters in the long run. We have traveled from the first cities to the global networks of the modern world. We have watched empires expand. We have watched political systems fracture. We have seen how drought, war, inequality, economic stress, information failure, and institutional rigidity can interact. But there is one final story to tell. It is not the story of Rome. It is not the story of Egypt. It is not the story of the Maya.
It is our story. Because for the first time in history, humanity can look backward at thousands of years of civilizational experiments and ask a conscious question. What do we want to become? The answer will determine whether the future looks like another cycle of expansion and crisis or something genuinely different. Visual style. Begin with Bronze Age ruins and archaeological landscapes. Gradually transition to Rome, Maya sites, abandoned cities, infrastructure, modern megacities, satellites, and finally, Earth from orbit. Sound. Use restrained percussion during systemic crisis sequences. Reduce music almost completely during the final questions. Allow silence to create weight. Narration. This section should feel like the penultimate act of a premium documentary. Reflective, evidence-conscious, and increasingly personal.
Avoid saying that civilizations always collapse. Archaeological scholarship emphasizes transformation, regional variation, continuity, and resilience. The Maya, for example, experienced episodes of population loss and political change, while Maya culture persisted. There is a temptation to look at the ruins of Rome, the abandoned cities of the Maya, and the remains of ancient kingdoms and see a simple pattern. They rose, they became powerful, they declined, and eventually they disappeared. Then we look at our own civilization. We have enormous cities, we have global institutions, we have unprecedented technological power. And we ask, are we next? But history does not give us such a simple answer.
Researchers continue to debate what causes societal collapse, and even influential theories, such as Joseph Tainter's diminishing returns model, are frameworks for comparison rather than mechanical predictions. Modern research also emphasizes resilience, transformation, and the interaction of multiple pressures. So perhaps the most useful question is not whether we are repeating history, it is whether we are repeating human behaviors. Because those behaviors are familiar. We become successful. Success makes systems larger. Larger systems require more coordination. More coordination creates complexity. Complexity solves problems. Then complexity creates new problems. And eventually, the civilization must decide whether it can change the system that created its success. One of the most dangerous ideas in history is the idea that the present is normal. A prosperous society can begin to assume that prosperity is simply how life works. A stable political system can begin to assume that stability is permanent. A reliable supply chain can become invisible. A functioning institution can become taken for granted. But every achievement depends on conditions. When those conditions change, yesterday's solutions may become tomorrow's weaknesses. This is the paradox of success. The better a system works, the less people think about maintaining it. Until something breaks, then everyone discovers how much depended on it. The ancient world had granaries. Modern civilization has databases, power grids, financial networks, telecommunications, ports, satellites, and software. The objects are different. The principle is the same. Civilization is a collection of systems that most people never see until they stop working. Imagine two civilizations facing the same crisis. The first asks, what happened? What did we misunderstand? Which assumptions failed? What should we change? The second asks, who is responsible? Who can we punish?
How can we return to the way things were? The first civilization may emerge from the crisis stronger.
The second may emerge more divided. The difference is not intelligence. It is learning. A society that can learn collectively possesses something incredibly valuable. It can convert failure into information. That does not mean every crisis produces progress. Some crises produce trauma. Some destroy institutions. Some create long-lasting conflict. But the capacity to learn increases the range of possible futures. And that may be the deepest form of resilience. It is easy to imagine that every major human problem will eventually be solved by a new invention. A better battery, a more powerful computer, a new medical treatment, artificial intelligence, fusion, robotics. Perhaps some of these technologies will transform civilization. But technology does not decide how societies use power. Institutions do. A technology can increase productivity. It can also increase inequality.
A communication platform can connect people. It can also fragment them. AI can expand access to knowledge. It can also make manipulation cheaper. Energy technology can reduce environmental pressure. It can also create new geopolitical dependencies. The lesson is not that technology is dangerous. The lesson is that technology is a multiplier. It amplifies the capabilities of the system that controls it. If the system is wise, technology can magnify wisdom. If the system is unstable, technology can magnify instability. This is why the future of civilization is ultimately a question about institutions and human choices. For thousands of years, power meant expansion, more territory, more soldiers, more resources, more population, more cities. But in a world of planetary-scale systems, power may increasingly mean something else. The ability to coordinate, the ability to recover, the ability to maintain infrastructure, the ability to process information accurately.
The ability to change course without destroying social trust. The ability to cooperate with people who disagree. This is a quieter form of power. It does not always produce monuments, but it determines whether monuments remain standing. The future may therefore belong not simply to the most powerful civilizations. It may belong to the most adaptable ones. After thousands of years of human history, 5 lessons stand out. First, prosperity creates complexity. Success encourages societies to build larger and more interconnected systems. Second, complexity creates both strength and vulnerability. It allows coordination on enormous scales, but it also creates dependencies. Third, external shocks rarely act alone. Drought, war, disease, economic stress, and political conflict become dangerous when they reinforce one another. Fourth, institutions matter more than monuments. A civilization can lose a ruler and survive. It can lose a city and survive. It can survive a war. What becomes dangerous is losing the ability to solve new problems. And fifth, adaptation is not optional. The world changes whether a civilization is prepared or not. The strongest societies are therefore not those that predict every crisis. They are those that can remain functional when their predictions are wrong. Stand before an ancient ruin, and it is easy to feel that you are looking at an ending. A broken wall, an empty street, a collapsed temple, a forgotten palace. But ruins are incomplete stories. They tell us what was built. They tell us what was abandoned. They sometimes tell us what went wrong, but they rarely tell us everything that survived. The descendants of ancient civilizations continued speaking languages. They preserved traditions. They moved to new cities. They changed political systems. They adapted to new environments. The civilization that existed before may have disappeared, but humanity did not.
This is why the history of collapse should not be a story designed only to frighten us. It should be a story about transformation. Every civilization leaves something behind: knowledge, institutions, ideas, technologies, mistakes, and warnings. So imagine humanity 1,000 years from now. Perhaps historians will look back at our century. They may see our skyscrapers, our satellites, our computers, our cities, our artificial intelligence. They may see extraordinary achievements, but they may also ask a different question. When humanity gained unprecedented technological power, did it gain unprecedented institutional wisdom? Did we learn to manage complexity? Did we protect the systems on which billions depended? Did we reduce unnecessary fragility? Did we preserve the ability to cooperate? Did we recognize warning signs before they became disasters? We cannot know what those future historians will conclude, because the story is still being written.
And that is precisely why history matters. Civilization can sometimes feel like a force larger than individuals. Governments exist, markets exist, cities exist, institutions exist, and it is easy to believe that these systems will simply continue. But every institution is maintained by people. Every law is enforced by people. Every scientific discovery is transmitted by people. Every bridge is designed and maintained by people. Every classroom passes knowledge from one generation to another. Civilization is therefore not an object. It is an activity. It happens every day. And that means its future is partly a choice. Not one person's choice, not one government's choice, but the accumulated choices of billions of people and the institutions they create. What will civilization look like in 1,000 years? We cannot know. Perhaps humans will live on other worlds. Perhaps artificial intelligence will become a permanent partner in civilization.
Perhaps nation-states will become less important. Perhaps new forms of political organization will emerge. Perhaps some technologies we consider essential today will seem primitive. The details are unknowable. But one principle is likely to remain. Future societies will face problems that their existing systems were not designed to solve. That is the nature of history. The world changes. Systems fall behind. Then societies adapt. The challenge is to make adaptation peaceful enough, intelligent enough, and fast enough to prevent crisis from becoming catastrophe. Now return to the beginning. A small human settlement, a few families, a river, fields, fire, tools, stories. No empire, no skyscrapers, no satellites, no artificial intelligence. And yet from those small communities emerged cities, states, mathematics, writing, science, art, philosophy, medicine, and technology. Human civilization is one of the strangest experiments in the history of life. It is powerful because humans cooperate. It is fragile for exactly the same reason. Cooperation requires trust. Trust requires institutions. Institutions require maintenance. Maintenance requires resources. Resources require adaptation. And adaptation requires the ability to admit that yesterday's solution may no longer work. That may be the hidden thread connecting every civilization we have studied. Not a mysterious curse, not an inevitable cycle, a recurring challenge. The challenge of changing before change becomes unavoidable. So, why do human civilizations seem to rise and fall after reaching extraordinary prosperity? The honest answer is, there is no single answer. Some societies experienced environmental stress. Some faced warfare. Some suffered political fragmentation.
Some encountered economic crises. Some became increasingly unequal. Some struggled with demographic change. Some accumulated complexity faster than their institutions could manage.
And in many cases, several of these pressures interacted. The deeper pattern is not that civilization must collapse. It is that success changes the system. The civilization that succeeds today is not the same civilization that existed before its success. Its population changes, its institutions grow, its expectations rise. Its infrastructure expands, its dependencies multiply, its problems become more complicated. Eventually, the society faces a new challenge. Can it adapt to the consequences of its own success? That is the real question. And it is a question every generation inherits. The camera moves slowly across an ancient city at dawn. The stones are silent. Grass grows through the cracks. The people who built these streets are gone, but the city remains. Cut to another ruin, then another. Egypt, Rome, Maya cities, ancient China, Mesopotamia. Thousands of years of human ambition, thousands of years of human mistakes, thousands of years of adaptation. Then the image changes.
A modern city at night. Millions of lights. Cars moving through streets. Aircraft crossing the sky. Data traveling through invisible networks. A satellite looking down at Earth. The planet appears small, fragile, connected, alive. The narrator speaks. We often ask whether civilization will survive. Perhaps that is the wrong question. Civilization has changed many times before. The better question is, what kind of civilization will survive? One that protects only its wealth? Or one that protects its ability to adapt? One that measures power by expansion? Or one that measures power by resilience? One that treats history as a collection of stories? Or one that treats history as evidence? Because the future is not waiting somewhere in the distance. It is being built now. Human civilization has never been guaranteed. Every generation inherits a world it did not create, and every generation changes it. Some build, some destroy, some preserve, some reform.
Some refuse to change until change becomes unavoidable. But the story continues. The ruins of the past do not tell us that humanity is doomed. They tell us that nothing remains stable forever. Not empires, not economies, not political systems, not technologies, not even the definition of civilization itself. The only constant is change. And perhaps the greatest achievement of civilization would not be to defeat change. It would be to become good at living with it. So when we look at the rise and fall of ancient civilizations, perhaps we should not ask, when will ours collapse? We should ask, what can we change when we still have the choice? Because civilizations do not become resilient when the crisis has already arrived. They become resilient in the years when everything still appears to be working. That is the paradox. The best time to prepare for decline is during prosperity. The best time to repair trust is before it disappears. The best time to reform institutions is before they fail. And the best time to learn from history is before history becomes a warning about us. The story of civilization is not finished. It is still being written. And for the first time in human history, we know enough of the past to understand the question. The future is not guaranteed, but it is not predetermined either. It is ours to build. If this journey through human civilization changed the way you see history, consider subscribing to the channel. And tell us in the comments, do you believe civilizations inevitably decline? Or do you think humanity can finally break the cycle?
Because perhaps the most important question history can ask is not what happened to the civilizations that came before us. It is what we will choose to do with what they left behind. Why do civilizations rise and fall? History does not predict the future, but it can teach us how to face it.
This documentary should present civilizational decline as a contested historical question, not as an established universal law. Major scholarly approaches emphasize interacting causes, complexity, environmental and political pressures, and resilience. Joseph Tainter's work is influential in complexity-based explanations of collapse, while later research continues to test and qualify such models.